Welcome, everyone, to tonight's talk about the rescue and rehab of sea turtles on Cape Cod. I'm very happy to have naturalist and photographer Bob Michelson here with us tonight for this presentation. But before we begin, let me tell you that I'm going to mute you all as you enter the call. So please save your questions until the end. However, Bob says you can interrupt if you have a burning question as he goes along, and you do have the ability to unmute yourself. But you may also type your questions in the chat, and I will pose them to Bob at the end. And also, I'm filming this program for Milton Access Cable for people who can't be here tonight, and it'll be available to view at a later date. And I want to thank the Friends of the Milton Public Library for their support of my programs. Now, let me tell you about our speaker. Bob's work has appeared in numerous magazines, and he has been diving for 42 years. It might be longer than that now. He's a PADI dive master, a specialty instructor in underwater photography and videography, a naturalist, and a PADI project-aware fish ID. Originally based in Braintree, Mass. However, he's moving to Walpole soon. His company is called Photography by Michelson, and his website is www.pbmphoto.com, which I will put in the chat for you. So now please join me in a warm welcome for Bob Michelson.
Thanks, Jane. As Jane mentioned, tonight we're going to be covering rescue and rehabilitations of sea turtles on Cape Cod. Now, there are several species of sea turtle that visit our waters every summer through the fall. And they're usually dinner plate sized turtles that are here to feed on a bounty of jellyfish. Sea turtles feed exclusively on jellyfish. And we have a whole bunch of jellyfish that we're going to talk about. Now, let's first cover the sea turtles that visit us. This is the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. It's the most critically sea turtle on the planet. It's they give birth. The females will come up out of the ocean and dig nests up in above the high tide mark on sand beaches down throughout the Caribbean, off the coast of Mexico, and the southern part of the United States. We also have the loggerhead sea turtle. Now, the Kemp's Ridley is the smallest of the sea turtles that we have visiting here. An adult Kemp's Ridley weighs about 40 pounds. It's about 2.5 feet long, and about 1.5 feet in diameter. The loggerhead sea turtles, the next one on our hit parade. These are much larger turtles that can go up to 250 pounds, 3 to 4 feet long from head to flipper in the back of it, and a beautiful shell on the top of it. Then we have one of the larger sea turtles that visit us. It's the green sea turtle. This sea turtle happens to be myrtle. How many people here have ever visited the New England Aquarium in Boston? Quick, raise your hands if you're on visual. Okay, never mind. Not important.
I have,
Myrtle
Bob.
Myrtle has been on display at the New England Aquarium in Boston since it first opened in 1969. Sea turtles are a very long-lived species. They can live to between 60 and 80 years of age. Some can live to be up to 100 years old. So Myrtle has been on display at the aquarium since 1969. So she's getting up there in years. She also weighs about 450 to 500 pounds, depending upon the time of year. And she's roughly 5.5 to 6 feet long. When I go in the giant ocean tank, and I've been in there 6 times so far, she thinks my bald head is a head of lettuce, and she'll rest on top of my head and slap my head with her flippers to try to break open the head of lettuce to consume it. Sea turtles don't bother people. They're vegetarians that feed primarily on jellyfish. Now, let's talk about the jellyfish that they feed upon. One of the larger jellyfish we have around here is the lion's mane jellyfish. Now, up in the Arctic, the top, this part here, called the mantle or the bell of the jellyfish, can be up to 6 feet across. The tentacles can be up to 200 feet long. This particular jellyfish does have stinging cells throughout its tentacles. So if you're swimming up around here and you see an orange blob in the ocean, 20, 30 feet away from you, back away from that animal. The tentacles are much longer than the animal is in size. And if you get stung by a jellyfish, it's kind of disgusting how you treat it on the scene. Go to the men's or ladies' room and urinate on yourself. That'll neutralize the sting. or get denatured alcohol and pour that all over the stinging area where the animals made contact with you. That's the only way that they're going to hurt you is if they sting you. So this is the lion's mane jellyfish. It's the largest jellyfish we have in New England. Sea turtles love these animals. Then we have the moon jellies. Moon jellies, July, August, and early September. They're so thick in harbors and bays around here that it looks like from when you're looking down at the surface from a dock or the boats, you can walk across the water on your backs. I don't recommend you do it because you're going to go right through them and sink. These do not have stinging cells like the lion's mane. They're about 10, 12 inches, 14 inches in diameter. And they pulse through the water. All true jellyfish pulse through the water by convulsing their muscles and pushing their way through the water column. That's what a true jellyfish will do. And they're eating small planktonic animals like phytoplankton, plant plankton, and zooplankton, which is animal plankton, which feeds on phyto or plant plankton. Those are microscopic. The other one on our hit parade is the Atlantic sea nettle. This is another stinging jellyfish that the mantle or the bell on the top of this animal is only about a half of a foot across. But the tentacles can be up to 20 feet long, and they also sting. So you have to be careful of these animals as well. And usually if you see one Atlantic sea nettle, there are multiple animals around in that body of water. And the only animal eating these are sea turtles. No other fish in the ocean feeds on jellyfish other than, I correct myself, the giant ocean sunfish or the mola.
Excuse me, Bob, can I just ask,
Yes.
so they don't sting the turtle?
The sea turtles have leather-like skin around their face and neck area. So it's so thick and heavy that they don't feel the stings coming from the jellyfish's tentacles.
And then
So they can make a meal about the jellyfish, and even if while they're getting stung, they just don't feel it
Okay,
because
and
they're
then they just eat
leather-like
them.
skin,
Yeah, and then they just eat them. Okay, well,
and they
thank
just
you.
eat them, and it doesn't bother the digestive system. They can eat and expel the stinging cells when they go to the bathroom when they're done eating. But
Okay,
they have leather-like skin that doesn't phase them when they get stung.
interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is a colonial type of a jellyfish called a siphonophore. That's a mouthful. And basically, it's a colony of microscopic animals joined together for the greater good. This group right here is propulsion. It will pulse through the water, pulling it this way. The next part is digestion. This part of the animal, and again, it's made up of thousands of microscopic animals connected together for the survival of that species. And then the bottom part of this animal is digestion, and then we get into reproduction. That's how they reproduce. So there's thousands of little animals connected together into this one 3-foot long specimen, and I've only seen one in my over 40 years of scuba diving up here, and it was off of Beverly. Then we're getting smaller. Now this is a jelly, but not a jellyfish. It's called a ctenophore, CTEPHONE, CTENAPHORE, ctenophore. The C is silent, or a comb jelly, COMB jelly. And they're not a true jellyfish. You can see there's 8 rows of hair-like structures called cilia that go around the body. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3 more on the other side that you can see through the animal's clear body. And they make a wave-like pattern going down each arm. And that's how it moves about in the water. This animal, and I've seen it, can stop, spin, and hover like a helicopter and spin 360 degrees without working a sweat. They don't have stinging cells. They're harmless towards people. They're about 4 to 5 inches long from the back tip of the lobe to the top of the animal. So this is a ctenophore or a comb jelly. Now we're getting smaller. This is a sea gooseberry. The top of this animal looks like a ctenophore or comb jelly and has 8 ribs around it, but it's closed and it's about the size of a walnut. This has 2 stinging cells, two tentacles that hang out from the bottom of the animal. This animal right now is upside down, This is during a night dive, and right at the surface, these animals all were attracted by our dive lights and our video lights, and we got stung all around our faces during this night dive before we went down to the bottom to get away from the surface. And it hurt. My face was hurting me for a couple days after that. We're getting smaller. This animal is about 3/4 of an inch tall. Here's the dome right here. Here's the back of it. And the total length of this animal is about 3/4 of an inch to an inch tall by about 3/4 of an inch across. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 ribs around it that are reproduction only. They do not sting, and jellyfish will eat all of these species of jellyfish. And they pulse through the water as well. Another small cousin, oops, let's go back. This is a crisscross hydromedusa. Say that 3 times quickly. Crisscross hydromedusa. It's called that because if you connected these pieces together, it looks like it's making the sign of the cross. It's not a religious animal. That's just how it gets its name. It's a crisscross hydromedusa. It's a juvenile or immature phase of some other type of bottom-dwelling invertebrate. We think it could be a starfish, a sea cucumber, but we just don't know at this early stage of development. So this is about an inch across, about the size of a silver dollar. Now what's happening is Cape Cod is a natural barrier for the sea turtles. They can come up through the Cape Cod Canal, swim around the Outer Cape to get into Cape Cod, Massachusetts Bay, and all the way up into Canadian waters in the Gulf of the Bay of Fundy and North Atlantic waters. So what happens is the ocean temperatures are warm. These are dinner plate sized turtles on the most part. We've seen loggerhead sea turtles and grease sea turtles. And the largest one, which I don't have a photo of, is the leatherback sea turtle. Those can be up to 7 to 8 feet long and weigh upwards of 1,000 pounds. We have baby forms of those up here feeding on jellyfish right now. And come end of November into December, we start getting our nor'easters up here. The winds coming out of the north and east, blowing to the south and west. Well, the turtles are reptiles. They're cold-blooded animals. They have to breathe. So they come up to catch a breath. You have a nor'east wind coming over the water, and it's below freezing. The turtle gets sick. It develops pneumonia. And they wash up on north-facing Cape Cod beaches. From Plymouth all the way down to Provincetown on the north-facing beaches, the sea turtles get cold stunned in the wintertime. November to the beginning part of January, any northeast wind is blowing the sea turtles up on north-facing Cape Cod beaches. So they become cold stunned that very frequently have pneumonia in one or both lungs. They have, because they're lethargic, they get washed up and banged against rocks. So they have broken carapaces or main shells on their backs. Their flippers get impaled by sharp rocks. So they're brought back to health at the New England Aquarium, Sea Turtle Rescue Facility, and the Quincy Shipyard. They have one of the large buildings in the shipyard, and it's strictly to rehabilitate, rescue and rehabilitate sea turtles. And we're going to take a look at that whole process a little bit later. Any questions so far about the animals that live up here, what they're feeding on?
Yes,
Or any
Bob.
other...
Yes, Bob. So Laura has a question. She says, it seems that if sea turtles eat jellyfish, they aren't exclusively vegetarian. What food group are jellyfish considered to be?
Jellyfish are actually invertebrates. They have a backbone and they're a marine animal. They're not plants. So jellyfish are actually animals. They're invertebrate animals of the ocean. We refer to them as gelatinous zooplankton. So they're a jelly-like form of zooplankton. The microscopic animals that North Atlantic right whales will feed on are 1/4 of an inch in size. Jellyfish are much larger targets of the same genus of marine life found up here. So jellyfish are not plants, they're animals. They're gelatinous zooplankton. That's scientifically how they're referred to. So if I see them while I'm diving, I start counting how many of what species I'm seeing in the water, and I report that to the Division of Marine Fisheries with the state and the NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service. So they need to know how many of what animal are up here and what species of animal are pursuing them to feed upon them.
I hope that
Does
answers
that
your
answer your question?
question, Laura. If you want to ask something else, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, any other questions about what species of sea turtles are up here, what they're feeding on?
Okay, I think she's very quiet, so I think
Okay, let's
maybe
move on.
that's good.
So I was hired by NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and their division. They have many arms of their agency, the National Marine Fisheries Service, to go out in the field and document the entire process of rescuing a sea turtle on Cape Cod and how they are processed and brought back to health in Quincy. So this photography coincides with a video that I produced for the federal government. We're on Wellfleet Beach right now on the north-facing side of Cape Cod. Here's a volunteer from the the Massachusetts Wellfleet Audubon Society Sanctuary Building. They have a team of over 200 volunteers that walk north-facing Cape Cod beaches every morning. This rescuer came across a dinner plate size, lethargic Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. It's just at the edge of the waters. They have very little tides down at Cape Cod, not like 8 or 10 feet like we have up here in Boston Harbor. So the water may move in and out a couple feet only. That's about it. So this sea turtle is washed up to the edge of the water and the beach, and it's just laying there. The flippers are going back and forth with each wave. You can't even tell if it was alive. Excuse me. So this volunteer picks it up, quickly looks it over, see if there's any obvious injury done to the animal, and he brings it back to his car, puts it in a padded box with towels, brings it back to the Wellfleet Sanctuary office, and technicians will then give it a physical. Here is a small loggerhead sea turtle that was rescued, now being measured by a technician. Excuse me. These technicians are specially trained to take measurements of the carapace or the top shell of the sea turtle and the plastron, the bottom shell of a sea turtle, or any turtle for that matter. They use tape measures. They use calipers to measure the length, the diameter, and the height of the carapace. So here he's using a tape measure to get the length of the carapace. Now he goes in with a very fine instrument called the caliper to get the actual true width of this animal. And now he's trying to find a pulse. They have an electronic device, because even if you use a stethoscope, the pulse on these animals can be as slow as 1 beat per minute when they're cold stunned. So they're cold-blooded animals. They get cold stunned. Their heart rate slows down to nothing. So they have to use a special equipment like this probe to sense for a heart rate, because at 1 beat per minute, you cannot hear it with the stethoscope. So you have to use electronics to determine if the animal's still alive or if it's passed. This one, thankfully, still is alive. Now he's measuring with a tape measure to get the curvature on the top of the carapace of this animal. And I'm going to take a guess that this sea turtle is about 5 years old based upon the size that I see here and when I saw it in person. And it weighed 16.2 kilograms, which is about 35 pounds. Imperial that we know of. We never converted to metric. We're the only country in the world that's not metric. All of science, the entire scientific community only deals in the metric system. They don't deal in anything imperial, like inches or yards or miles. Everything's in the metric system. Here, the same turtle decides to open up and say, ah, which is a good sign. It's strong enough that it can open up its mouth to try to get some air down its throat. They detected and noted that it has an injured flipper. There was a hole punctured through the flipper, probably when it was banged against sharp rocks, getting beached along the Cape Cod beach that it was rescued from. It's packed up in towels. It has a tag. So it's 2013. It's sea turtle 2013. This is the 297th sea turtle rescued this winter. It was only the third week in November that I went out with them. They have another month and a half of sea turtle strandings. The average year that the aquarium sees is 800 sea turtles per winter. The worst one was 2013, 2014, where they had over 1,400 sea turtles stranded. They had to send sea turtles all around the country to aquariums and rehab facilities because they simply didn't have the space to take care of all those injured and sick animals. So they put into a box, handled with care, wrapped in towels, and volunteers from Wellfleet will drive them up Route 3 to Quincy, the former General Dynamics shipyard, where they brought into the New England Aquarium Sea Turtle Rescue Facility. So here is a veterinarian technician giving the animal a complete physical, wearing protective gloves as to not give it any more disease. This is the same loggerhead, checking out the plastron, the bottom shell. They first start off by putting sea turtles in 50-degree water in a child's swimming pool that's no more than 2 inches deep. So they can rest on their flippers, lift their head above the water, and not drown. They're going to raise the water temperature about 2 degrees per day. I'm sorry. They first put it in water temperature that's just about freezing. Then they slowly raise the water temperature 2 degrees per day to bring it up to an ideal temperature of about 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So it can take up to a couple of weeks to accomplish that. Here is a sick Kemp's Ridley sea turtle rescuing in a child's swimming pool that was just rescued off of Cape Cod. It's able to lift its head up out of the water, but it's too weak to do anything else. Here's a loggerhead sea turtle receiving intravenous medication. They give them IV like people. Veterinarian technicians and nurses staff this area. The doctors, they're veterinarians that staff here and dictate what animal gets what medication for what disease or ailment that they're trying to recover from. And here's Dr. Steve Innes, the chief veterinarian at the New England Aquarium. He looks a little bit older now than when I took these photos. He's been with the New England Aquarium for over 20 years. He's in charge of the health and well-being of every animal under the auspices of the New England Aquarium. The fish, the jellyfish, the octopus, the seals out back, every animal in captivity, including sea turtles in Quincy, he's in charge of all of their health. One person with thousands of species and many animals to take care of. I tip my hat every time I meet this man. Connie Marigo, who is now retired, was in charge of the rescue and rehabilitation program for the New England Aquarium, who covers all of New England. They're responsible for sea turtles injured or cold stunned throughout all 6 New England states. Now, obviously, there's no sea turtles in Vermont, so we can rule them out. But there's coastal areas of Maine, New Hampshire, Mass, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Sea turtles usually don't strand down in Rhode Island and Connecticut because they can migrate out of coastal areas of that area. But Cape Cod's a natural hook. They can't figure out how to get around Provincetown. So they strand on north-facing beaches. So here, Connie's putting a piece of PVC pipe down the throat of a Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. And they're going to do a bronchoscopy. They're putting a camera down the bronchial tubes of the animal to see if it's got bronchitis. Here's a picture looking down the bronchial tubes of a Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. Thankfully, there's no shadowing. There's no bronchitis in this animal. But they took digital x-rays of the sea turtle, and there's a deep shadow on the left side. That's pneumonia that Dr. Innes is pointing to. See the deep shadow on the left lobe? This Kemp's Ridley sea turtle has left lobe pneumonia. That determines how it's going to get treated. Now, sea turtles, once they're in the care of the aquarium, can take anywhere from 6 months to a year to get back to health, to be released back into the wild. It's a long, drawn-out process. As they get stronger, they're put into a 500-gallon saltwater tank, and they're fed a diet of fish and jellyfish, where they put medicine inside the fish to help medicate these animals to get them back to full strength. This is sea turtle number 331, swimming in a 500-gallon tank as it's getting stronger and healthier. Here's a cute little story. This young girl's name is Heidi Bell. She's from Quincy. And several years ago, she had a fundraiser. She loved sea turtles, so she made handmade jewelry and sold it around Quincy to raise money for the Sea Turtle Rescue Program. So the aquarium invited Heidi and her family to visit the sea turtles that she's caring for with her donation. She made her donation of a check. They invited her family to come into this facility, which is closed to the public. It's only available by appointment only and tours with schools. So Heidi came in, they made it a media day. All the Boston TV stations and newspapers were there to interview Heidi and take her picture and get her into the newspaper. It was so cute. Here, Heidi's looking at a green sea turtle in a 1,000-gallon tank that's probably 300 to 400 pounds. Now, after they're brought back to health, volunteer pilots up here in Massachusetts and across New England will take these sea turtles with technicians on board and voluntarily fly them down to the Carolinas and Florida to release them in Gulf Stream waters. So here, the aquarium is passing a Kemp's Wrigley sea turtle that's been recovered to be put onto the plane by the pilot. They're loading I think it's the same loggerhead that we saw earlier. It's 6 months later. Now it's healthy, being loaded onto the airplane for a nice flight down to South Carolina or North Carolina beaches. Here they're letting go of a loggerhead sea turtle out of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. The pilots volunteered their fuel. They volunteered their time to help these endangered animals. All sea turtles are on the federal endangered species list. So there's a massive effort to help recover any sick or injured animal and get it back into the ocean. If the animal is too injured or too sick and cannot be released back into the ocean, it's given a nice, long, healthy retirement at an aquarium around the country. You have a question, Jean?
Yes, Bob. So, that was my question about the endangered animals, but actually Beatrice has a question, which is it possible to visit the site anywhere in Massachusetts? And I'm not sure which site she's talking about. So Beatrice, if you want to unmute yourself and talk to Bob here.
Well, I can save you part of the question. The only time a sea turtle comes up out of the water is for nesting. There are no nesting sites in New England for sea turtles. They only nest in the South Atlantic and Caribbean waters. They don't come up here. They will not lay their eggs in cold water. So we don't see sea turtles come out of the water unless they're very sick or injured or very, very ill. So the best place to see sea turtles is at the New England Aquarium in Boston. The giant ocean tank has recovered sea turtles that are too injured to be released back into the wild. Myrtle, the green sea turtle, was injured 60 years ago, and she's still in the aquarium doing quite well, living a nice life. The loggerhead sea turtles and Kemp's Wrigley sea turtles that the aquarium has in that tank are injured or sick sea turtles that cannot be released back into the wild. They may be blind in one eye, missing one lung, or have a broken shell that's too injured to release back into the ocean. But if a predator like a shark attacked the turtle and had a cracked carapace, it's gone. Sea turtles survive shark attacks by withdrawing their arms, head and neck into their shells, and the shell is strong enough to protect them from a shark bite.
So Bob,
here they are.
Excuse me, but they're always released back into warmer waters. They're never
Yes.
released back here.
They don't release them up here where we can see it. They're only released in Gulf Stream waters. The waters of South Carolina and Florida never get below 50 degrees.
Yeah. Okay.
Up here in the wintertime, our ocean can get to be in the low 30s.
Okay.
Where I go diving, even this time of year where I go diving, it very seldom gets above 50 degrees Fahrenheit and 30 to 40 feet of salt water around here. Unless you go south of Cape Cod, where the Gulf Stream comes up, and we have tropical fish deposited along our south coast beaches in Cape Cod. That's another story for another day. But sea turtles, if they're able to get past the Cape Cod area, they'll swim back down to Cape Cod, down along the east coast of the United States to nest in late winter, early spring in south coastal beaches. So there's no nesting up here at all of any sea turtles.
So Bob, Beatrice responded and said, "Thank you for your response. I love these cold-blooded creatures." And then Antonio said, "How long can they hold their breath?" Oh, and she
Uh,
also said, she was actually asking about, to see them, Beatrice, back to Beatrice. "I meant while healing." Okay, thank you for your response. So she meant actually going to see them when they're healing.
it might be possible if you reach out to the public affairs director at the New England Aquarium. They've gone through some change. I'm not sure who the current person is. You can find it on their website. It's neaq.org, neaq.org, and look for the director of public affairs. And if you put in a request and you want to bring your family to see some recovering sea turtles, they might be able to accommodate you in the shipyard. It's by request only. It's not open to the general public.
Okay.
So if it's for educational purposes, they're more apt to say yes.
Okay, I hope that answers your questions, Beatrice. And then Antonio said, "How long can they hold their breath?"
They can hold their breath for 20 minutes to a half an hour at a time, much longer than I can. I can do 3 to 4 minutes. 4 minutes is pushing it.
Okay, very good.
Here
Thank you.
we are back in Florida, releasing. Here's the same guy that we saw in Wellfleet kneeling down as they release a recovered loggerhead sea turtle. Now, when they do this frequently, they put radio transmitters on the tops of their shells. So when they're swimming and diving, every time the sea turtle surfaces, it transmits data to a satellite overhead, and it gets downloaded in Quincy onto a computer at the sea turtle facility in Quincy. So they can see where they're swimming, what they're feeding on, because a lot of these transmitters have cameras built in. They can see what depth they're swimming at, what the water temperature is they prefer. They're learning more and more about sea turtles every year when they release these animals. Usually they release them in April or May, where it's too cold up here, so they fly them down to the Carolinas or Florida or the coast of Georgia and let them go down in warmer waters. And they may swim back up here. We don't know. That's what they're trying to determine. Do they come back up here to feed on our jellyfish? I'm sure they'll have answers for that, but it hasn't been published yet.
And they don't
So
put those little tags on them, like those little tracker things?
they don't put tags on sea turtles. They only put radio transmitters that after a certain period of time, the transmitter will release and float to the surface, and they can radio transmit and fine tune in where that transmitter is floating in the ocean and recover it for a later use.
I see.
They're very expensive transmitters. They don't want to use it once and let it go away.
Yeah.
They're thousands of dollars for one of those radios.
Oh, boy. Okay, thank you.
Here's a close-up of the loggerhead. This is courtesy of Connie Marigo from the New England Aquarium. I didn't get to see this. I didn't go down to Florida to photograph this. Here's the loggerhead making its way back into the ocean as we wave goodbye and wish it well. Now we're back in the giant ocean tank at the New England Aquarium, where I've been very, very fortunate. I've been blessed for different magazine and TV shows. I've been able to go in this tank so far 6 times in my career. I'm hoping to go back again for more visits for other projects, magazine stories, TV shows. This one was for NOAA. I got to go into the tank to photograph this particular Kemp's Ridley sea turtle is missing one of its lungs, so it can never be released back into the ocean. So sometimes it swims cockeyed in the water, which in the ocean it would never survive. But here, divers go in and will hand feed each sea turtle food with medicine in it to keep them healthy. So they know each sea turtle is getting the right amount of nutrients to survive. Here is a loggerhead sea turtle swimming towards the top part of the giant ocean tank at the aquarium. And here's Myrtle. Myrtle thinks my shiny bald head is a head of lettuce. So when I'm at the top of the tank, there's a dive platform to go into the water. She will not let me go in the tank. They have to lure her away from the dive platform with a head of lettuce so I can get in the water. Because she sees this reflection. If you haven't noticed, I'm follically challenged. And she thinks it's a head of lettuce. And when I'm down at the bottom, she'll rest her 450-pound body on me and slap the sides of my head with her flippers to try to crack open the head of lettuce. So I gently push her away and say, "Honey, I'll take your picture in a minute. Right now, I'm trying to photograph a different animal. I apologize."
Oh,
She's
boy.
a gentle giant. Any questions at all about sea turtles?
Okay. All right, Bob, if you take your image off, we can see everybody. Let's just see here. I didn't see any other questions in the chat, I don't think, but yeah, I'll let people unmute themselves. There we go.
So anybody can either unmute yourself or write a message in the chat, and Jean can relay it to me. Any questions about sea turtles, about what they feed on, about their biology, anything at all? I'll be glad to field your questions.
Oh, do I hear somebody asking a question?
I think I hear somebody, but I can't understand them.
Yeah,
Can you hold your, if you have a handheld device, can you hold it closer to your mouth so we can hear you, please?
everybody's very quiet, Bob.
Oh, come on, you must have some questions. You're all experts on sea turtles, and you'll pass my test.
Maybe.
There is no test. I'm kidding. I'm just trying to get some reaction from somebody.
That was a lot of good information. Oh, and wait a minute. We have something in the chat, Bob. Hold on. Okay, this is Vanessa. She says, "Good evening. I'm an architecture student from Germany, designing a fictional rehabilitation center for turtles and other marine animals. Could you kindly inform me of the essential rooms needed for such a rescue and rehabilitation center?"
The space requirements. I would recommend reaching out to the aquarium for that. They're the experts. I'm just a documentary photographer. Reach out to the New England Aquarium. I'm sure they'll collaborate with you and help you with your project. They don't mind sharing their information and their knowledge base with any interested party. So if you're trying to build a facility to rehabilitate sea turtles elsewhere, I'm sure they'll give you the right information.
That's a very interesting job.
That's a very interesting job. I wouldn't mind if it was close by, if it was in New England, I wouldn't mind visiting it and photographing it.
Yeah, that's great. That's a wonderful question, Vanessa. So Bob, do you want her to go to the website to find the right person to contact at the
Oh
aquarium?
gosh, let
Yeah.
me use my phone for that. If I do this on my computer, I might lose you.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I have Vanessa's email, so you could send it to me and I'll send it to Vanessa. How's that? Just
Okay,
do
I'm
it.
on the
Just do
aquarium
it
website.
tomorrow. You want to do it tomorrow? Just send it to me.
Sure,
How would that be, Vanessa? That's a
sounds
great.
good.
Okay.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
just send me the email and I'll try to find some information.
All right. Tomorrow I will send you her email. And then Laura says, how about growth rates? How much per year do they grow?
Very good question. They grow minusculely annually. Um, all turtles shed scutes, layers of their shell as they grow. So even to possess one of the scutes from the top of an endangered animal is against the law. So if you see one washed up against the beach, leave it alone. Or if you find it, turn it into your local police station. It's against federal law to possess any part of an endangered animal.
Hmm.
How long has sea turtles been endangered? Oh goodness, good 30 plus years. All
30.
sea turtles have been on the endangered species list for a good 30 years.
Hmm.
Sea
Interesting.
turtle, the sea turtle, the Endangered Species Act was enacted back in the 1970s. And both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, who handles land-based animals, and the National Marine Fisheries Service, that's responsible for all ocean-based animals, place animals on that list. So it's a very in-depth list. You can go to either agency's websites and Google endangered species list, and you can see all the animals, the fish, the plants, birds, land mammals, whatever the species might be that's endangered or threatened federally and state. So there's two different lists. Massachusetts, we have a list of state endangered animals like the timber rattlesnake in the Blue Hills. Those are state endangered animals. It's against state law to possess a timber rattlesnake. Not that I'd want to,
Yeah.
or to harm one. A lot of people will kill those animals because they are fearful of them. Well, I know where they are. I can't tell you where. I'm sworn to secrecy. I've been to den sites, and it's in the Blue Hills. There's two remaining populations of timber rattlesnakes and copperheads in the Commonwealth of Mass. One is in the Blue Hills Reservation. That's all I'm going to tell you. And one is in Mount Tom and Holyoke. Other than that, they've been wiped out from this stuff, this part of the state, this part of the country. There are no more timber rattlesnakes for the entire state of Maine. Connecticut has a small population. I think Rhode Island might be wiped out as well. There's none in New Hampshire, none in Vermont that I'm aware of.
No.
So timber rattlesnakes used to be in all forested areas of all 6 New England states. They've been wiped out, mainly out of fear and collecting.
And collecting. So
Yeah.
is that really bad for environment? Because what do they eat, a lot of bugs? I mean, what is it?
Timber rattlesnakes eat rodents. They're great. All snakes eat rodents. A timber rattlesnake's not going to bother a human unless you step on it or encroach upon its territory. And like I've been preaching through every wildlife talk I give you, it's really not going to impact you for sea turtles because the odds are, unless you go to an aquarium, you're not going to see a sea turtle. They don't come up out of the water in New England. They stay in the ocean all the time, feeding on jellyfish.
Unless they're cold stunned.
If they're cold stunned and you walk a north-facing Cape Cod beach early in the morning after a northeast wind, you'll find probably some sick or injured sea turtles, but you can't touch them. You're not trained in how to do that. You have to call 911 and get a professional that knows how to handle those animals. There's a right way and a wrong way to pick it up and even turn around and look at it.
Yeah.
And we're not trained in that.
Right. Okay. So Vanessa says, oh, thank you very much. And Jacqueline says, what has your favorite experience been when you go on a dive, when you're going on a dive?
I've had a couple. One is freshwater, one is saltwater. I'll start with freshwater first. One of the coolest fish I've ever got to document is the eastern brook trout and the Atlantic salmon, which is on the endangered species list. Eastern brook trout have made a tremendous comeback after being restored 20, 30 years ago. They used to only be in 14 states across the country. Now they're in over 30. They're expanding their range with stocking. And basically with brook trout, they've restored their habitat. The brook trout have come back and repopulated naturally. Atlantic salmon, there's been multiple attempts by the federal government to restore Atlantic salmon. They've all failed. 3 years ago, the federal government gave up on restoring Atlantic salmon altogether. So there's only 7 rivers in down east Maine. And down east for me is north and east of Bangor. That's what down east Maine is, north and east of Bangor, Maine. So southern Maine rivers are not down east rivers. They're southern Maine rivers. So the Kennebec, the Saco are southern Maine rivers. They're not down east rivers. The Denny's, the Machias, the Narraguegas, those are down east rivers. The Penobscot is a down east river. So there were many attempts to restore Atlantic salmon to those rivers. It failed miserably. So the state of Maine is still working on restoring the salmon in their rivers because it's a big fishing industry up there. It's catch and release only. Because they're endangered, you can't keep an Atlantic salmon in Maine. You have to release it immediately after you catch it. And there's a certain hooks you can use to catch the fish. And then you have to release them right away. You can't keep it. There was a practice starting back with Herbert Hoover's presidency, where the first salmon caught in Maine waters was given to the President of the United States. That practice stopped around the time of George W. Bush, because the fish were going down in such drastic numbers that they were afraid to remove one fish from the river and give it to the president. So that hasn't happened in almost 30 years now. I saw an Atlantic salmon come up out of the water, wriggle its way over a sandbar to go upstream to get to spawning habitat. I was so awestruck. I had my camera in my hands. I was too busy going like, I didn't take the picture. I didn't take the picture, and I'd never seen it again. Eastern brook trout. I've been up to the Lakes region of New Hampshire, photographing and videotaping eastern brook trout. Back in 2009, 2010, I made 8 trips up there during fall spawning season. It took the 8th trip during a snowy day with air temperatures in the 20s to finally get brook trout spawning in a small stream near Newfound Lake in New Hampshire. I can't tell you where. I'm sworn to secrecy. And if I want to do this again, I can't divulge where I'm taking the pictures. And the
Interesting.
funny story was, I dragged my wife to all of this. God love her. Where the opposites attract. I dive into the craziest things underwater. She'll help me get my dive gear on, pass the cameras down to me, and go sit in the truck and read a book or knit. She doesn't go in the water.
Not
So
like
we're the
me.
opposites attract family. And
Mhm.
she's looking at this point after the 8th visit. They're doing something in the water. Get back in the air. Take your pictures. We're not coming back up here again. It's a 2.5 hour drive for me to spend snorkeling 4 or 5 hours at a time trying to get brook trout spawning. 8th time was the charm.
She is very patient, Bob.
Yeah.
You're lucky.
So
Okay,
those are my two favorite fish.
that is very interesting, Antonio. I hope you liked that story. That was Jacqueline. That was Jacqueline's question. So then Vanessa just said amazing. And Antonio said, how many species of sea turtles are there and how many come to Massachusetts?
The answer is all of them. And let's go down the list. There's loggerhead sea turtles, green sea turtles, leatherback sea turtles, green sea turtles, loggerhead sea turtles, Kemp's Ridley sea turtles. So in this part of the world, we get 4 species of sea turtle. And we see them all in Cape Cod Bay, Massachusetts Bay, all the way up to Maine waters. They're up here now feeding on jellyfish. They're going to start turning around going south as the water temperatures start to cool by mid to late October. And the ones that get stuck here by November are the ones that are in danger of getting cold stunned. It only takes one nor'easter mid to late November with cold 20-degree temperatures to get the animals up catching a breath, and they get 20-degree temperatures in their lungs. They develop pneumonia from that. And that goes on until the beginning part of January.
So are there a lot of other species of sea turtles in other parts
There
of
are
the
other
world?
species of sea turtles in other oceans of the planet. In the Atlantic, the main ones we see up here are leatherback, green, loggerhead, and Kemp's Ridley sea turtles. There are other species in other parts of the Caribbean Sea and point south of the South Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean have different species of sea turtles. All the sea turtles that we have are found in every ocean of the planet. But for the northwestern Atlantic, those are the 4 that we see up here in Cape Cod Bay, Massachusetts Bay, and the Gulf of Maine.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Antonio. Um, Thank you. And so, yeah, you already saw this message from Marianne. How long have sea turtles been endangered and what was the cause for them to become endangered? Did you see
Oh
that one?
gosh, I didn't answer the cause. The cause is different parts of the world will hunt sea turtles for meat. If you go to the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands or any of the Caribbean islands, they serve turtle on their menus.
Mm.
So some fishermen will go out and net them, kill them, sell them to a restaurant. There are sea turtle hatcheries rearing down in Cayman Islands and the Bahamas and other island nations such as that, where they raise sea turtles for food intake.
Hmm.
So they'll dig up nests, incubate the eggs and hatch them, grow them in captivity until they are adults, slaughter them and send them to restaurants for
Oh,
harvest.
that's awful. Oh my God.
Wild sea turtles, it's against all federal law and international law to harm them in any way.
But you can't
So
catch
why do
them.
they become endangered? They get killed by boat strikes. They get caught in fishermen's nets. They ingest plastics that are thrown in the ocean. They see a clear plastic bottle. They think it's a jellyfish. They swallow it. They choke to death.
Ah,
That's the main causes of sea turtle mortality is ingestion of plastic products that people throw in the ocean. You know, the 6-pack rings that people throw in that connect beer, 6 packs of beer. People throw them in the water. They stick their neck through it. It chokes them. one ring will choke the sea turtle. It can't swallow food. It dies from starvation.
Oh, that's tragic.
They swallow clear bottles. They choke to death.
Oh,
They get trapped in fishing nets. They drown because they have to breathe air.
that's awful. I bet when you're diving, you pick up trash all the time, right?
Well, I do all the time when I'm diving, but
Yeah,
sea turtles aren't where I am. I'm in shallow water. They're out in the open ocean. They're feeding on jellyfish. Most of the
yeah.
places I go diving, we don't see too many jellyfish unless you go out a ways, go out on a shipwreck several miles off the coast. If there's other bigger fish to worry about, like the ones feeding on seals right now. And there are
Sharks.
seals out where I'd go diving on the shipwrecks. And where there are seals, there were great white sharks. And I'd rather not deal with that.
I can believe that. Hmm. Okay, so
So,
Vanessa has one more question, Bob.
yes,
She says, do you see evidence of intraspecies or interspecies language?
I've
Language.
never seen sea turtles get into a conversation before.
You have?
I have not.
You have not.
I don't know how they communicate. I've seen body behavior, like them swimming side by side for mate courtship. They do exhibit different behaviors for mating, but other than that, they're pretty much solitary animals. They don't congregate in large herds or schools, um, unless to mate, unless to reproduce. And then they're off just on their own, feeding on jellyfish, trying to survive and get bigger and survive until the next year. And
What are
then
the
migrate back down south to give
what,
birth to their next clutch of eggs.
what do they do with the babies? Do they go like swim with the mother, the babies?
No, mother will go up on a beach, um, late spring, early summer, down south. She'll go up on a beach, excavate a hole, deposit her eggs, cover the eggs with sand, go back in the ocean. They'll hatch about 80 to 90 days later, and the hatchlings emerge from the sandy nest that they were deposited in and scurry to the ocean. There's nobody there to protect them. There's all kinds of predators that feed on those babies. Great blue herons, egrets, seagulls, sharks, any other animal that can sink their teeth on a small baby, soft-shelled sea turtle will make a meal out of them. Very few live to survive to become adults.
And the mother never goes back to check on them?
Mother never goes back to check on them. Our freshwater turtles that we have 8 or 10 species, that can be another talk for another day. I have all the photography done for that. I just haven't built the slide presentation yet. So that can be a presentation for sometime next year once I have it completed. But I have other things going on that we talked about that's
Yes,
going to be put into the back burner for now.
yeah, many
But
animals.
freshwater aquatic turtles, the mother only comes up out of the water to deposit her eggs May and June of every year. The rest of the time, they spend their entire lives in the water.
On the water.
They may come up and bask on logs and rocks and ponds and lakes, but they never come up on dry land, only to deposit their eggs.
Hmm. How often do they have babies? Like
Once a year. Once a
gestation
year.
once a year.
One clutch of eggs once a year, and the number of eggs depends upon the size and species of the turtle as to how many eggs they're able to carry and deposit into their nests.
Hmm.
A large snapping turtle, about yay big, 2 feet long, 30 pounds, will probably weigh deposit somewhere between 30 and 50 eggs, depending upon her size
At one time?
at one time. And the snapping turtle I saw at the end of May in Randolph, coming out of a pond, had a nest that she elongated. It was something like 6 or 7 feet long. She kept digging new parts of a trench, laying some eggs, covering it over, moving on, digging another trench, depositing more eggs and moving on. And when she was done, she went back into the pond.
Okay, Bob, that's all very interesting, but back to Vanessa's question, do you ever hear them communicate? Like, do they make a noise? Do they?
I've never heard a sea turtle make
Sure.
noise, even in the rehab facility. The only type of communication I've observed in aquarium settings is behaviorally. They're not audible, they're behavioral. So they don't speak to one another. They give off body language, kind of like humans do, men and women do with each other. They give off body language, but they're not able to speak. Seals can bark and give off different sounds that we can hear audibly. Whales do the same thing. They're very audible underwater and above the water when they stick their heads up. But sea turtles don't have that kind of sound capability. They don't have a vocal cord.
So what do they do? Like put their heads together if they're in love? I mean, what do they do? They just
I've
come.
never seen that behavior. And if I do, it'll make a great story for a magazine.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Okay, let's see here. Laura says, and Vanessa, thank you for those interesting questions. Laura says, thank you for the facts and stories. Sea turtles are fantastic. Their long distance navigational abilities amaze me, even though some get stuck in Cape Cod Bay.
They
Oh,
swim thousands of miles during the course of their lifetime. It's amazing. You figure from the South Caribbean Sea down to South America, all the way up to here and back again. That's several thousand miles in 1 year just to feed on jellyfish.
wow.
It's similar to the great white sharks we have here. The great white sharks visiting our waters usually hang out off the southern tip of South Africa,
Huh. They're
and
coming.
they're following 600,000 plus gray seals peeing and pooping in the water. The current's going from north to south to Africa. They're following that scent up to Massachusetts. That's why every year we get more and more great white sharks up here feeding on more and more gray seals.
Wow. It's gonna be a whole new world. Um, let's see now. Beatrice says the different species, do they have a variety of blends of breeds? In other words, do they interbreed maybe?
They don't interbreed.
They don't.
Male and female of the same species only. They don't. They're not like a coy wolf. When we gave that presentation a while ago,
Mm-hmm.
coyotes were hybridized. The coyotes we see here in Milton, Braintree, Randolph are hybrid coyotes. And just forgive me if you've heard this presentation before, but basically the gist of hybridization with coyotes is prior to 1900, there were never coyotes east of the Mississippi River. The last timber wolf was killed east of the Mississippi River around 1931 in the Midwest, east of the Mississippi. And when that happened, coyotes that always occurred west of the Mississippi River, the western coyote, went up into Canada, interbred with whatever animal was available, gray wolves, large breed domestic dogs, and started to make their way down into upstate New York, northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Now they're all the way down to Florida on the East Coast. While those coyotes that we see in Milton in the Blue Hills have 84% DNA of Western coyote, 8% gray wolf, and 8% large breed domestic dog, like that of a German Shepherd. Most of the coyotes I see around here have the markings of a German Shepherd.
So they've
A
interbreeded.
long pointed snout and a huge bushy tail and a much taller shoulder that I know they're not a German Shepherd running down the street, but it's a coyote.
Yeah.
And it's a hybrid coyote. There is no such animal as a coy wolf. That's a misnomer. I worked with experts publishing a story on that in Natural History magazine. Dr. Roland Kays, he's a renowned canid expert out of North Carolina. He wrote the story and I illustrated it with photography. And he said, there's no such thing as a coy wolf. We have hybrid coyotes.
That's
And
a myth.
there is no hybridization of sea turtles because there's plenty of them to breed amongst their own kind.
Okay.
They're not plentiful enough to be delisted from the endangered species list, but there's enough that they can find one another and make babies.
Like babies, hopefully more and more. Well, this was very interesting, Bob. I learned a great deal about sea turtles. Are there any other questions from anybody? You can put them in the chat or you can just unmute yourself. Everyone is very quiet, Bob. Okay, so I would say thank you very much for your presentation.
Do we want to tease people?
Just
Do we want to tease people about another potential program for later in October?
well, yes, so I'm thinking of having a bobcat talk. So I hope you guys will come to that. Because I thought that would be a good winter animal. Nice furry winter animal, bobcat. And I once saw a bobcat in my home state of Vermont when I was about 12. And no one believed my sister and I, but it definitely was a bobcat. So I think bobcats would be interesting.
It
So
wasn't a
maybe
cougar. They're gone from around here. It wasn't a cougar. It wasn't a Canada lynx. It had to be a bobcat.
I think it was a bobcat. I'm quite sure it was a bobcat. Yeah, and we just stood there and let it run off.
Show me the
So,
picture.
yeah, we ran over we got over the stone wall and there he was. So anyway, you guys, thank you for being here. I want to thank everybody for being here. And I guess we'll see you next time.
Enjoy the rest of
So,
your summer, everybody. Stay safe.
yep. Okay. Good night. Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.